Have you ever wondered why some relationships, no matter how meaningful they seem, suddenly come to an end? Maybe it was a friendship that felt inseparable, a family bond that unexpectedly frayed, or a romantic relationship that seemed destined to last forever. When these connections dissolve, the pain can leave us questioning what went wrong and why it happened. But what if these moments of loss weren't about punishment or failure, but were part of a divine plan? What if the removal of these relationships was God's way of preparing you for something far greater than you could imagine? Today, we'll explore the deeper reasons behind why God sometimes takes people out of our lives and how these experiences can lead us closer to His purpose. Before we dive into this thought-provoking discussion, take a moment to subscribe to this channel and join our community of reflection and growth. Relationships are among the most profound gifts in life. They shape who we are, challenge us to grow, and provide companionship during our most vulnerable times. Yet, not every relationship is meant to last forever. God, in His infinite wisdom, sometimes removes people from our lives for reasons we may not understand at first. It can be painful to let go, but often, these endings pave the way for new beginnings. You might feel confused, abandoned, or even betrayed, but as the Bible reminds us, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. Every person we meet serves a purpose, but not all are meant to stay. Imagine this. You're standing on the edge of a new chapter in life. God is calling you to a higher purpose, a new level of spiritual growth, or a new direction entirely. Yet, not everyone can join you on this journey. It's not about their worth or their goodness, but about the unique path God has laid out for you. Some people in your life may not be ready for the transformation you're undergoing. They might still be clinging to old habits or mindsets that no longer align with the person you're becoming. God sees what lies ahead, and sometimes He removes people who could hold you back from fulfilling your destiny. As C.S. Lewis wisely said, if you want to fly, you have to give up what weighs you down. Letting go isn't easy, but it's a necessary part of growth. You might also find that some relationships weren't meant to be in the first place. In our quest for connection, we sometimes ignore red flags or convince ourselves that we can make something work when it clearly isn't aligned with God's plan. The world tells us that chemistry and shared dreams are enough, but the truth is, only relationships rooted in God's purpose will bring lasting peace and fulfillment. When these relationships end, it's an opportunity to reflect, seek God's guidance, and trust that He has something better in store. As painful as it might be, God's no is often a redirection toward His perfect yes. There are times when God uses heartbreak as a tool to open our eyes. Betrayal, though deeply painful, can reveal the true character of someone we've held close. It's not that God desires our suffering, but sometimes He allows it to teach us invaluable lessons about discernment, trust, and His faithfulness. When someone hurts you deeply, it forces you to see them clearly, not through the lens of who you wish they were, but as they truly are. This clarity, however difficult to accept, is a gift. It frees you to move forward, unburdened by illusions or false hopes. God doesn't leave you in your pain. Instead, He uses it to shape you, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for the blessings that lie ahead. Sometimes the loss of a relationship is about redirecting your focus back to God. It's easy to let our earthly connections consume our energy and attention, leaving little room for our Creator. When a relationship becomes an idol or a distraction, God may gently or forcefully remove it to draw us closer to Him. It's in these moments of loneliness and longing that we often find ourselves turning to God with renewed fervor. The pain of loss becomes a catalyst for spiritual growth, pushing us to seek Him with all our hearts. And in His presence, we find the peace and healing that no human relationship could ever provide. When you look back on the relationships that have ended, it's natural to grieve. But take comfort in knowing that God's plans for you are far greater than anything you can imagine. He sees the bigger picture, the relationships, opportunities, and growth that lie ahead. Trusting Him doesn't mean the pain will disappear overnight. but it does mean that you can find hope in the promise of His goodness. Every closed door is an invitation to step through the open one He's prepared for you. Let's continue this journey of understanding why God removes certain relationships from our lives. As we delve deeper, consider how these moments of loss are not just random occurrences, but part of a grand, divine design. Relationships, though cherished, are sometimes temporary tools in God's hands, meant to refine, teach, and prepare us for the road ahead. When God allows a relationship to end, it's often because He's preparing you for something better. It might feel counterintuitive. Why would He take away something that brought joy, stability, or meaning? But think of it like pruning a tree. To bear more fruit, branches must be trimmed. God sees the potential within you and understands the obstacles that could prevent you from reaching it. Some relationships, though not inherently bad, may stifle the growth He desires for you. Whether it's a friendship rooted in comfort rather than challenge, or a partnership that limits your spiritual walk, these connections must sometimes be severed to make room for new opportunities. It's hard to let go of what feels familiar. Human nature clings to what we know, even when it's no longer serving us. You may wonder why God allowed the relationship to begin at all, if it wasn't meant to last. The answer lies in His purpose for that season of your life. Every person we meet, every experience we have, is a chapter in the story God is writing for us. Some people are meant to stay for a lifetime, while others are here to teach us specific lessons or guide us through particular seasons. When their role in your story is complete, God moves them aside so you can continue growing. Consider this. Have you ever stayed in a relationship out of fear? Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, or fear of what others might think? These fears can trap us in situations that aren't aligned with God's plan. But God doesn't want us to settle for less than His best. He calls us to trust Him, even when it means stepping into the unknown. Letting go of a relationship that isn't right can feel like stepping off a ledge into darkness. But faith assures us that God's hand is there to catch us. Sometimes God removes people because they were never truly for us. It's a sobering truth, but not everyone who enters our lives has good intentions. Some relationships are rooted in selfishness, manipulation, or even deceit. Over time, these dynamics can drain your energy, compromise your values, and pull you away from God's purpose. When God reveals the truth about someone's character, whether through their actions, words, or a sudden betrayal, it's a painful yet liberating experience. It's His way of protecting you from further harm and redirecting you toward the relationships that will uplift and encourage you. One of the most difficult aspects of losing a relationship is dealing with betrayal. Betrayal cuts deep because it comes from someone we trusted, someone we let into the most vulnerable parts of our hearts. Yet, even in this pain, there is purpose. Betrayal forces us to confront the truth and make decisions we might otherwise avoid. It pushes us to lean on God for strength and wisdom and teaches us resilience. As C.S. Lewis once said, sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. In losing what wasn't meant for us, we often discover the freedom and clarity to move toward what God has intended all along. Another reason God removes relationships is to teach us about forgiveness and healing. When someone hurts us, our instinct is often to close off, protect ourselves, and harbor resentment. But God calls us to a higher standard. He invites us to forgive, not because the other person deserves it, but because forgiveness frees us from the chains of bitterness. It's in forgiving others that we open the door to our own healing. The Bible reminds us, "Forgive as the Lord forgave you." Colossians 3 verse 13. When you let go of anger and resentment, you make space for God's peace to fill your heart. Loss also has a way of revealing where we've placed our trust. Have you ever realized, after a relationship ended, that you were depending on that person for your sense of worth, happiness, or identity? It's a humbling realization, but one that can lead to profound growth. God sometimes removes these relationships to remind us that our true security and identity are found in Him alone. People will fail us, even those with the best intentions. But God's love is unchanging, His presence unwavering. He is the one constant in a world of shifting relationships. As you navigate the pain of losing someone, it's easy to fall into the trap of questioning your own worth. You might wonder if you weren't good enough, smart enough, or loving enough to make the relationship work. But these thoughts are lies that the enemy uses to keep you in a cycle of self-doubt. God's word tells us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139, verse 14. Your value doesn't depend on who stays or leaves your life. It's rooted in the unshakable truth of who you are in Christ. In moments of loss, it's also important to examine your own heart and choices. Sometimes, relationships end because of immaturity, either ours or the other person's. Immaturity doesn't always mean age. It's about perspective and priorities. Maybe you entered the relationship for the wrong reasons, ignoring red flags or compromising your values. Or perhaps you were seeking validation from the relationship instead of from God. These experiences, though painful, are opportunities to grow in wisdom and discernment. God uses them to refine our character and prepare us for healthier, more meaningful connections in the future. One of the most profound truths to accept is that God often takes people away from us to draw us closer to Him. In the hustle and bustle of life, relationships can become all-consuming. We pour our energy, time, and affection into another person, sometimes to the point where our connection with God becomes secondary. It's not always intentional, but it happens. God, in His boundless love, will sometimes remove these relationships to reclaim our attention and redirect our focus back to Him. The loss can feel like a void, but that emptiness is often the fertile ground where a deeper relationship with God can flourish. In these moments of loneliness, you may find yourself praying more earnestly, seeking God's comfort, and diving into His Word for answers. It's here, in the quiet and stillness, that God reveals Himself most profoundly. As C.S. Lewis observed, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. That shouting isn't meant to harm us, it's His way of saying, I'm still here, and I want to be the foundation of your life. When we prioritize God above all else, He fills the void with a peace and joy that surpass all understanding. Another reason God removes people is to protect us from harm. Not all relationships are what they seem on the surface. Sometimes, the people we hold closest are leading us away from God's path, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Their values, actions, or influence may clash with the person God is calling you to become. You might feel an unease in your spirit, a sense that something isn't quite right. That's often God's way of nudging you toward awareness. When we ignore these promptings, God may intervene more directly, removing the relationship to safeguard our spiritual and emotional well-being. Think of it this way. A parent who loves their child will step in to prevent them from touching a flame, even if the child doesn't understand the danger. Similarly, God's removal of a relationship might feel abrupt or even cruel at first, but it's His way of sparing us from greater pain down the road. Trusting in His protection requires faith, a belief that He sees what we cannot, and that His plans are always for our good. Sometimes, the ending of a relationship is tied to God's desire to redirect your life. You may have thought you were on the right path, building a future with someone who seemed perfect for you. But God, in His infinite wisdom, knows when a relationship no longer aligns with His plans for your life. This redirection isn't about punishment, but about preparation. He is clearing the way for new opportunities, new relationships, and new chapters that align with your purpose. It's not easy to embrace change, especially when it feels like your world has been turned upside down. But remember, God's plans are always better than ours, even when we can't see it in the moment. Consider the Israelites as they wandered through the wilderness. They longed to return to Egypt, even though it was a place of bondage, because the uncertainty of the wilderness felt too overwhelming. But God was leading them to the promised land, a place of freedom, abundance, and blessing. Similarly, we often cling to relationships that feel comfortable or familiar, even when they no longer serve us. God's removal of these relationships is his way of leading us out of the wilderness and into his promises. Another lesson we can learn from these experiences is the importance of surrender. Letting go of a relationship is never easy, especially when emotions are deeply involved. You may struggle with questions of why and what if, replaying moments in your mind and wondering if things could have been different. But holding on to the past only delays the healing and growth that God wants to bring into your life. Surrendering doesn't mean you stop caring about the person or the memories you shared. It means releasing the need to control the outcome and trusting God to guide you toward his greater plan. Forgiveness often plays a key role in this process. When a relationship ends, it's natural to feel anger, sadness, or even resentment. But carrying these emotions only weighs you down, preventing you from moving forward. Forgiveness is not about excusing someone's actions or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of bitterness and choosing to live in the peace that God offers. The Bible reminds us, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Psalm 34, verse 18. When you lay your pain at his feet, he will provide the comfort and strength you need to heal. Another important aspect of these experiences is recognizing the role of obedience. When God calls us to let go of a relationship, he often provides signs or moments of conviction. Perhaps it's a repeated pattern of conflict, a growing sense of unease, or even a clear revelation through prayer. Ignoring these signs can lead to prolonged pain and missed opportunities for growth. Obedience to God's will requires courage, a willingness to trust his guidance, even when it goes against your own desires. But in following his lead, you'll find that his plans are far greater than anything you could have imagined for yourself. Lastly, losing a relationship can be a catalyst for personal and spiritual growth. It's in the moments of heartbreak and solitude that we often discover our true strength and identity in Christ. These experiences teach us resilience, deepen our faith, and shape us into the people God created us to be. The pain of loss becomes a stepping stone to greater maturity, wisdom, and purpose. And as you grow, you'll find that God brings new relationships into your life, ones that align with his plans and enrich your journey in ways you never thought possible. As we journey further into understanding the divine purpose behind relationships and their endings, let us take a moment to reflect on the hope and growth that comes through these experiences. Every chapter of our lives, including the ones marked by loss, is part of God's greater story for us. When God removes a relationship, it can sometimes feel as though a piece of your identity has been stripped away. You may question your own worth, wonder if you've failed, or even feel abandoned by God. But the truth is, God's actions are never without purpose. His removal of certain people is often his way of refining your identity, stripping away the things that distract or detract from who he created you to be. In this process of refinement, he reminds you that your worth doesn't come from who is in your life, but from who you are in him. This season of loss is also a time of preparation. Think about a potter working with clay. Before the clay becomes a beautiful vessel, it must first be molded, shaped, and even placed in the fire. The heat is uncomfortable, but it's necessary to strengthen the clay and prepare it for its purpose. Similarly, God uses these moments of heartbreak and change to prepare us for the greater plans he has for our lives. He knows the relationships, opportunities, and challenges that lie ahead, and he is shaping you to face them with strength and grace. In many cases, God removes a relationship because he has something better in store. It's hard to see this in the midst of pain, but over time, his plan becomes clear. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself, a moment where you look back and realize that the ending of one relationship paved the way for another, more fulfilling one. Or maybe it led to a season of personal growth and discovery that you wouldn't trade for anything. Trusting in God's timing means believing that he is working all things together for your good, even when it doesn't make sense in the moment. Another profound reason for the loss of relationships is God's desire to teach us about true love and healthy connections. Too often, we settle for relationships that are rooted in dependency, selfishness, or fear. These relationships may feel comfortable or even necessary, but they aren't aligned with the love God intends for us. His love is selfless, sacrificial, and life-giving, and He desires for us to experience relationships that reflect these qualities. When He removes a relationship that doesn't meet this standard, it's an invitation to seek connections that honor Him and uplift us. Consider how God might be using this season to teach you about boundaries and discernment. Boundaries are an essential part of healthy relationships, yet many of us struggle to set them. We fear rejection, conflict, or being misunderstood. But boundaries are not about building walls. They're about defining what is acceptable and protecting the peace and purpose God has placed in your life. When a relationship crosses these boundaries, whether through manipulation, disrespect, or distraction, God may intervene to help you reclaim your focus and self-worth. In these moments of intervention, God often uses silence and stillness to speak to our hearts. When a relationship ends, there's a tendency to fill the void with distractions, whether through busyness, new connections, or superficial comforts. But these distractions only delay the healing process. God calls us to sit in the quiet, to face our pain with honesty, and to lean on Him for strength. It's in the stillness that we hear His voice most clearly, reminding us of His promises and guiding us toward healing. Healing, however, is not a linear process. You may have days where you feel strong and hopeful, and others where the weight of loss feels unbearable. This is normal. Grief comes in waves, but God's love remains constant. The Bible assures us, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147 verse 3. Trust that God is with you in every tear, every moment of doubt, and every step forward. His grace is sufficient, and His power is made perfect in your weakness. As you heal, you may begin to see how God is using your story to bless others. The lessons you've learned through loss about resilience, faith, and forgiveness are not just for your benefit. They are tools you can use to encourage and support those around you. When you share your testimony, you remind others that they are not alone in their struggles and that God's love is bigger than any pain they may face. Your story becomes a beacon of hope, a reminder that beauty can rise from ashes. Another aspect of God's purpose in removing relationships is to cultivate a deeper dependence on Him. People, no matter how loving or supportive, are human and fallible. They cannot meet all our needs or fill every void in our hearts. Only God can do that. When a relationship ends, it's an opportunity to draw closer to Him, to rely on His strength and wisdom rather than leaning on others for validation or security. This dependence fosters a relationship with God that is unshakable, one that will sustain you through every trial and triumph. As we near the conclusion of this segment, let me encourage you to embrace this season with faith and courage. Trust that God is at work, even in the pain. Seek Him in prayer. Immerse yourself in His Word, and surround yourself with people who reflect His love and truth. And remember, this is not the end of your story. It's a chapter 1 that is leading to something far greater than you can imagine. As we come to the final chapter of this journey, let us reflect on the immense hope and purpose that God weaves through every loss, every goodbye, and every closed chapter. Relationships are a gift, but they are also a tool in God's hands, shaping us for His divine purpose. When God removes someone from your life, it's not a rejection, it's a redirection. We often mistake loss for failure or punishment, but God's ways are higher than ours. He sees the full picture, the plans He has for us, and the things we cannot yet comprehend. While it's natural to grieve the end of a relationship, it's also an invitation to trust in His greater purpose. Every person who enters and exits your life is part of the intricate tapestry He is weaving. No thread is wasted, and no moment is without meaning. As time passes, you may begin to see the beauty in God's plan. What once felt like heartbreak now feels like freedom. What once felt like rejection now feels like protection. You'll recognize that the people who left your life were never meant to stay for the journey ahead. They were part of your history, but not your destiny. This realization doesn't diminish the value they brought to your life. It simply affirms that their role in your story was temporary, and that's okay. One of the greatest lessons God teaches us through the loss of relationships is resilience. The pain of saying goodbye can feel overwhelming, but it also strengthens your faith and builds your character. You learn to lean on God in ways you never imagined, finding strength in His promises and comfort in His presence. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you choose to rise despite it. It's about trusting that God's grace is sufficient for every season, even the difficult ones. Another profound truth is that God uses these experiences to align your life with His will. We all have dreams and desires, but not all of them are in harmony with God's plans for us. When He removes a relationship, it's often because it doesn't fit into the bigger picture He's painting. It might not make sense at first, but as you walk in obedience, the pieces begin to fall into place. You'll see how God's detours lead you to places far greater than you ever imagined. His plans are always for your good, to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29 verse 11. Healing from the loss of a relationship takes time, and it's important to be patient with yourself in this process. Grief has no set timeline, and there's no right or wrong way to navigate it. Some days you'll feel strong, and other days the memories may bring tears. Allow yourself to feel the emotions, but don't dwell in them. Bring your pain to God in prayer, and let Him carry the burden. He promises to be near to the brokenhearted and to save those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34 verse 18. As you heal, take the time to rediscover yourself. Who are you outside of this relationship? What passions, dreams, and callings has God placed on your heart? Loss creates space for new growth, new opportunities, and new connections. It's a chance to focus on your relationship with God, to seek His guidance, and to align your life with His purpose. The end of one chapter is the beginning of another, and God's story for your life is far from over. Forgiveness remains a cornerstone of this journey. When a relationship ends, it's easy to hold on to bitterness, anger, or regret. But forgiveness is not about excusing someone else's actions. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of resentment. It's a choice to release the pain and let God's peace fill your heart. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget or reconcile. It means you move forward with grace, leaving the past in God's hands. As you move forward, remember that God has prepared new relationships and opportunities that align with His plans for your life. These relationships will uplift you, encourage you, and draw you closer to Him. They won't be perfect because no human relationship is, but they will be purposeful. Trust that God knows what you need and that He is faithful to provide it in His timing. Finally, let this be a season of gratitude. Thank God for the lessons you've learned, the strength you've gained, and the growth you've experienced. Thank Him for the people who were part of your journey, even if only for a season. Gratitude shifts your focus from what you've lost to what you've gained. It reminds you that God's blessings are abundant and that He is always working for your good. As we close this discussion, let me remind you that you are never alone in your journey. God is with you, guiding your steps, healing your heart, and leading you toward His promises. Trust in His love, lean into His presence, and walk boldly into the future He has prepared for you. If this message has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who might need encouragement, and leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so we can continue growing together in faith and understanding. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, God's plans for you are always greater than you can imagine. Stay strong, stay faithful, and keep seeking Him. God bless you.